Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a case that's a really powerful reminder of something.
Of how a forensic truth can just completely shatter an established story.
Exactly. We're getting into the complex and, frankly, painful story of Mariah King. Her death was initially ruled a suicide, but 6 months later, her boyfriend was arrested and charged with her murder.
And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is that it forces you to weigh completely different kinds of evidence against each other.
You have the initial scene, which on the surface pointed to self-harm.
And then you have the forensic finding, a single solid piece of physical evidence that just redefined everything.
That's right. So Mariah King, who was 29, died in July of 2024. This happened at the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jared Norman, in Sweet Home, Oregon.
And the initial reports, they all treated it as a tragic but apparent suicide by hanging.
But the police, right from the start, they sensed something was off. Inconsistencies. And that suspicion, that feeling, it launched a 6-month investigation.
Which led to Norman's arrest in January 2025 on, incredibly serious charges. We're talking second-degree murder and first-degree abuse of a corpse.
So our goal for you today is to move past the headlines. We want to really understand the source material that led to this complete 180.
We're going to focus on that crucial piece of forensic evidence and then see how it stacks up against the very, very conflicting stories about Mariah's life and her state of mind.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, the moment police arrived on scene. The sources are a little fuzzy on the date, either July 18th or July 24th, 2024.
Right. But the Linn County Sheriff's Office and the Sweet Home PD, they respond to the home on Nandina Street.
And the call is for an apparent suicide by hanging.
So from the outside, it probably looked like a tragic but straightforward situation. But investigators on the scene, they noted right away that, and this is a quote, things didn't add up.
That's a huge early flag, isn't it?
It's critical. When a scene doesn't fit the pattern you expect for a self-inflicted death, especially something as definitive as hanging, it just compels you to look deeper.
And that immediate suspicion is what prompted them to request a full post-mortem examination.
And that single proactive step is precisely what blew this case wide open.
This is where the story pivots completely, from suicide to a homicide investigation. During that post-mortem, the medical examiner discovered something.
They found what the sources only call a foreign object inside Mariah King's body.
We have to pause on that for a second.
We do. Because that is the single fact that defines this entire case. The term foreign object is vague, probably for legal reasons, but its implication is just devastating.
How so? I mean, if the cause of death was believed to be hanging, how does finding something internally change that to murder?
Well, it changes everything. First, the object itself suggests some kind of assault or trauma that just doesn't fit with a simple self-inflicted hanging. It makes you think about force or manipulation. And second, that charge, abuse of a corpse. It's tied directly to the foreign object. It implies the body was manipulated after death.
To conceal something.
Exactly. To conceal or maybe disguise the assault or what the real mechanism of death was. It elevates this from a tragedy to a calculated effort to hide a crime.
And that explains the 6-month timeline. They weren't just sitting on it. They were building a case based almost entirely on that one forensic find.
That's right. Jared Norman was arrested on January 15th, 2025, and he's still being held without bail. The physical evidence just completely overruled the initial appearance of the scene.
So, okay, let's pivot now and unpack the human side, the deeply conflicting views of Mariah's life with Norman.
Because you have to connect that physical evidence to motive and opportunity. And that's where the relationship dynamics come into sharp focus.
And the contrast in perspectives it's just stark.
It really is. You have Mariah's mother, Kim Lapham, and her sister, Michaela King. They describe being extremely close to Mariah right up until she started dating Norman in July 2021.
And after that?
Their story paints a very clear picture of isolation and control.
They alleged he was emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually controlling. And it wasn't vague either. We have specific examples from the sources.
Yeah, Mariah's mother said Norman would give Mariah the silent treatment if she spent time with her own family.
Or, and this is a big one, even if she got a job.
That is the textbook definition of coercive control, making your partner choose between you and, well, any outside support system.
And that control allegedly led to her making actual plans to leave?
Yes. Lapham confirmed Mariah was in what she called a slow process of getting out. In January of 2024, 6 months before she died, she was moving her things into her kid's room, planning an exit.
That detail feels huge for the prosecution.
Oh, it's critical. It suggests she was actively trying to preserve her life, not end it.
But then you have this completely different narrative from people close to Norman.
Right. His ex-girlfriend, Tiana Garcia, who's the mother of his 9-year-old son, Barrett, she defended him forcefully.
She called him a man's man, someone who was stuck in his ways, but not a killer.
And her testimony throws this massive alternative theory into the mix. She doesn't just believe Mariah took her own life.
No, she speculated that the foreign object might have been placed there after the fact.
To frame Norman. It's an enormous claim, and one the defense will almost certainly use.
She also gave this really emotional account. Her son, Barrett, who saw Mariah as a mother figure, was the one who found the body with Norman in the shed.
Yeah, and she recounted her son saying Norman was just bawling afterward. It paints a picture of a distraught, grieving partner, not a cold-blooded killer.
Which makes it so difficult to separate genuine grief from potential guilt.
And then you add the police interaction. Detective Potter from the SHPD described Norman as cooperative. Very straightforward, he said, and intense.
So you have this deep divide, calculated control from one side and distraught grief from the other.
Which forces us to look at the suicide question head-on. Because it's not like Mariah was perfectly happy before this. The sources are clear she had a history of struggling.
And that history is a really critical point of contention in this whole case.
It is. Mariah had confirmed past suicidal threats and ideations to her own family. Her mother recalled a very specific incident in July 2022.
That's the one where she took Norman's gun to Foster Lake.
Yes, and she called her mother, expressing suicidal intent. It was a documented event.
And that event had legal consequences for Norman, too.
Precisely. After that incident, Norman was charged with telephonic harassment against Mariah's mother. So this establishes a pattern of conflict, legal trouble tied directly to Mariah's relationship with her family long before her death.
The family also said that after she moved in with Norman, she started drinking heavily.
They described it as her way of numbing herself to cope with the mental toll of the relationship. And this all ties directly into her mental state on the final night.
And there was a witness that night.
A crucial witness, a friend named Jeanette Taylor. She found Mariah at a local business and said she was super emotional.
Mariah admitted she and Norman had fought, and then she showed Taylor marks on her neck.
And this is the part that's so potent for the defense. Mariah claims she did it to herself because she wanted to hurt herself. That's a witness confirming self-harming behavior just hours before her death.
So with that history and that witness, how did investigators still lean so heavily toward homicide?
This is where you have to think critically. The family provided their own emotional arguments against it. Her sister Michaela, a neighbor, they both said it was illogical.
Because she was a really good mother.
A really good mother to her 2 young kids, Libby and James. And her sister was adamant Mariah would never, ever have done that without leaving a note for her children.
Which is compelling, but it's an emotional argument. What about the police timeline that night?
The timeline is key to understanding the police mindset. Mariah's mother, Kim, asked for a welfare check that night.
Officers went to the house, but Mariah refused to open the door and told them to leave.
Then, just 90 minutes later, police are called back to the house. And this time it's the suicide call. That tight window, combined with the strange scene, just set off all the alarms.
And Detective Potter's insight kind of sums it all up.
It does. He acknowledged her history of ideations, but he pointed out that she never took the typical preparatory steps toward an actual attempt.
So it was more like a cry for help than a concrete plan.
That seems to be how they saw it. And when you combine that behavioral observation with the physical reality of the foreign object, the physical evidence just had to take precedence over the history of threats. It's a fact that you can't ignore.
So where does the case stand now, legally?
Norman has been indicted by a grand jury. They're moving toward trial. A final resolution conference is scheduled for March 11th.
And the defense is gearing up.
Oh, absolutely. His attorney, Gregory Skoll, says Norman is devastated, and they look forward to clearing his name. The strategy is pretty clear.
They'll argue it's a tragedy of suicide, and the answer isn't to, quote, falsely accuse an innocent man.
And to do that, they will have to directly challenge that foreign object evidence and the entire abuse of a corpse charge. It's a huge mountain to climb.
And amidst all this legal maneuvering, it is so important not to lose sight of who Mariah King was.
Definitely. Those who loved her, they remember her as this outgoing, energetic person.
Hmm.
Super sweet, super positive.
They said she was the kind this world needs more of, loved the outdoors, hiking, backpacking.
And the legacy she leaves behind is with her two kids, who are now living with their father. They're the ones coping with this devastating aftermath.
So we circle back to the core dilemma for you, the listener. You've got this complex web of alleged psychological
A
control
known history of mental health struggles.
and completely conflicting testimony about grief and innocence.
And all of that subjective information now has to be tested against one piece of cold, hard physical evidence. That foreign object.
The object that forced the charges of both murder and abuse of a corpse.
This entire investigation is such a powerful teaching moment. It shows the difference between the apparent truth, the initial suicide ruling, and the forensic truth that came from the medical examiner's table.
The prosecution's case is basically that the history of control and that final piece of physical evidence tell one unified story.
A story of homicide and concealment.
And that leads us to our final thought for you to consider. The sources detailed all of this alleged emotional and psychological control. When a death is initially ruled self-inflicted but then gets overturned by physical evidence, what are those subtle, non-physical indicators of domestic abuse like isolation or the silent treatment that investigators should maybe go back and analyze more intensely?
That's the key takeaway here, I think. The behavioral evidence that the family provided, her wanting a job, the silent treatment, her slow plan to leave it, all provides crucial context for a possible motive. The investigators use the forensic truth to give weight to the emotional truth of the relationship. It teaches us that sometimes the non-physical indicators are just as vital as the physical evidence that eventually comes to light.
It's a case where deep analysis of a relationship, combined with one single shocking discovery, changed absolutely everything. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.